We were knee deep in fecal matter, human waste, poop, shat. Literally, we were knee deep, walking, slushing, and working in human waste. That's right. This happened while I was in prison. You might want to stick around for this. It's crazy. I was in WCI, Washington Correctional Institute, in the mid-90s. And I was in the working cell block for disciplinary infractions. And I had got sentenced back there to like 90 days. But if you know anything about prison, you might get sentenced somewhere for 90 days, but that could turn into 3 years. For me, I wound up spending about a year in the working cell block because I got in fights. So you have to spend so much time in one level, level 1, you go to level 2, then eventually you get out. But if you get in a fight or you get a write-up, you go back to level 1 and you start all over. And that could take, and for me, I got in a couple fights while I was in the working cell block. Anyway, I remember, I will never forget the day that in Louisiana, you work in the fields. You literally do field labor. You work in sun unit. That's what it was called, sun unit. Literally, because there was no shade and it's field labor. A lot of people like to say it's like slave labor. I personally hate that comparison because that comparison assumes that we were all innocent and we were not innocent. So I don't like to compare the servitude that I did underneath hard labor inside the Louisiana prison system and compare that to slavery. I think that's unjust and unfair. And if we're being really honest, it's not being sincere in owning up to what we did. There was a punishment. The state of Louisiana had to issue us a punishment, and it required hard labor. If we didn't commit crimes and do wrong, then we would not have wound up in prison doing hard labor. I know some states, they don't understand this, but in the South and in Louisiana, you will work hard labor. You will work in the field. You will pick crops underneath men with guns on horses. As people sing, literally, they call them Negro spiritual tunes. Go look it up. That's what they call the music that people sang. Literally, while we was in prison, because in the South, there's way more blacks in prison than whites, just the way it is. So there might be, 20, 30 whites on the gun line, but there might be 200 blacks. So they're going to be the ones who overall lead the musicals. And so while we were working in the field, sometimes, tilling the field, somebody would start singing and they would start doing, humming music. And sometimes it would be like that old school chant, and so you would look at it like it was some kind of, back in time slave plantation type situation. But majority of these men were guilty, guilty, guilty. Now, there are some people in prison who are innocent, but by and large, that's not the norm. One particular hymn that I specifically remembering singing, or I never sung, but I would listen and it would move me. It would be spiritually moving, But one song I remember them singing in the field when I was in prison working in the fields was they would sing. And you could picture, man, a bunch of people, they got the hose and they tilling the earth, or we might be picking some crops. We used to pick okra. We picked cotton. We picked, got potatoes. You don't pick potatoes, but you dig the potatoes up. We did that, so we cut the field, the grass with ditch bank blades and with old school swing blades. But there was one song I remember them singing, man, and it was kind of like eerie, man. They'd be singing that song. There's a leak in this soul building. My soul has got to move. My soul has got to move. And somebody will be tat. You know what I mean? And then they go, there's a leak in this soul building. My soul has got to move. My soul has got to move by another building, not made by hands. And so there used to be some deep stuff to listen to, And so we'd be in the field working. But one day, everything changed, because even in prison, sometimes things could be peaceful, eerily peaceful, and quiet. You know what I mean? A lot of trouble just kind of just floats by and things just become uncanny. No trouble. Everybody's just working in the field, doing their best to get back to the dorm, wake up and get to the next day. And it seems like sometimes it can even be peaceful. The guards aren't screaming too much. The field work is normal, But everything changes there, y'all. It just became so crazy and it threw everything out of whack. Out of nowhere, we were waiting. And instead of giving us ditch bank blades and swing blades and a bag to pick some crops, they were handing out shovels. And we're like, dang, we ain't never getting no shovels, right? You know, unless we were digging some potatoes, but we wasn't digging no potatoes that day. And we got those shovels, and we didn't know why. We were waiting, and a truck pulls up. And we're like, what's that truck? And all of a sudden, the truck, boom, just dumped. And out came the stuff. At first, everybody thought it was just dirt. But when we got on and everybody started working, we realized, man, this was poop. And then one of the guards wound up admitting, yeah, this comes from the sanitation department. We're going to use it to grow crops. And you might think I'm crazy, but they had us spread this human feces, this poop, all over the field where they were going to plant crops. It was literally human fertilizer. And we were the ones who had to lay down the human waste that was dumped out of trucks, and they would come truck after truck, day after day. And this went on for about a month and a half. And so we get in there, and man, dudes are puking. Blah! They throwing up, man. They throwing up their breakfast, you know what I mean? They throwing up that old beat up, you know, stale bread with that porridge and that that oatmeal, you know, or them eggs that came from the chicken farm, you know. They throwing everything up. They can't handle it, man. They smelling that human poop, and it was disgusting. You gotta think I was a teenager at this time, you know, so I was just going with swinging with the punches. And we were literally shoveling human fecal matter. Dudes were getting it splashed in their face. For me to sit here and tell you that it didn't splash me in my face and my arms at any point, that would be a lie, because I worked in it for over a month. I shoveled human poop. And we literally laid the field with this human poop. And eventually, we picked crops that grew out of this human poop. Some dudes, they call that bucking. So they bucked, right? And so they said, I ain't working. You know, they call a truck. And when they call a truck, that means they're going to shackle you, going to bring you to the dungeon. They're going to bring you to the hole, you know, extended lockdown because you won't work. They call that a work infraction. You get written up and you can lose good time. You can wind up being in prison longer. But they got dudes that were willing to do that because they were like, man, I'm not fixing to shovel poop, you know? So, you know, we shoveled poop during the summer months in the hot Louisiana sun. And we would shovel it, man, lay it down. It just truck after truck came, and it was disgusting. And they were getting it from one of the sanitation departments nearby or something. And come to find out, later on in life, I researched it because I remember talking, you know, to people, man, everybody complained about it, was going to do, but everybody just wants to get out of jail. You know what I mean? They just waiting their day. They're trying to get out to work in cell blocks so they can get in-person visits, you know, and stuff like that. But some people didn't care, man. They were willing to catch more time. They stayed in jail for, you know, a couple years longer behind that poo-poo. And some people, you know, some people buck behind the poo-poo, and some people just, you know, just shoveled the poo-poo. I shoveled the poo-poo. I shoveled the human shat. You know, I laid it down and we picked the crops in it. And guess what we did, y'all? We ate the food that we picked, that was grown, in the human fecal matter. You could look it up. There are nations and there are places in the world where they literally use recycled human poop to grow crops. So it's not uncommon. My question to y'all is this: in a survival situation, how do you know where we're getting all our food from? Especially if it's coming from China. Right? Especially if it's coming from overseas. They don't have the same FDA regulations that we have in the United States. So you could easily be eating pooped vegetables. You know, you don't know. Or the fish that we're eating, they could be eating poop. We know they're eating their own poop, but they could be eating human waste. Human waste got to go somewhere. This doesn't magically disappear. It gets recycled. Where do you think oil comes from? Right? Comes from fossils. Death. You know, so we had firsthand experience, man. We used to have them shrimp boots on. If you know anything about Louisiana, them white shrimp boots, but they said they were black. They were them, you know, them work boots, you know, and we'll be sliding. Some dudes, I'll never forget the first day it happened. Some dudes didn't have their water boots on. Sometimes you know to have your work boots, your water boots on, and it's up to you. Well, some dudes you have to wear them brogans. And they had them brogans on. It's like some cheap Doc Martens that's made in a sweatshop somewhere. And they had them on. Oh, that poo-poo got in their feet. Dude had poo-poo feet. One dude got gangrene in his foot. I promise you, I think they cut off his middle toe. They had to cut it off, man. He caught gangrene there from that poo. He said he was going to sue the state of Louisiana. He ain't did nothing. He spent another year in the working cell block with no middle toe. They cut it off, you know, gangrene. Other dudes, man, they had spider bites. And spider bites, they get infected because they start scratching. A lot of dudes are savage. They wild, man. I wash my hands a lot. I'm particular about that. Even in jail, soon as I get back, well, they didn't wash their hands. They had that poo underneath their fingernails. And I wore my gloves. And them dudes had that poo under their fingernails. And they go to scratching them spider bites and the mosquito bites and gnat bites. And in some in Louisiana, especially you add poo, you're going to get a lot of insects. And so dudes were scratching their bites. And they were getting infected, man. Them dudes were getting boils. They had boils on their booty. You know, and they had their own feces they had to deal with, but now they were dealing with human feces. And then I know somebody's going to go type in the comments, oh man, where did I click into this crazy YouTube stuff? I'm telling you a true story, man. And y'all cry about it, man. This is what I had to deal with. I ain't the only one. I went to prison as a teenager. State of Louisiana, hard labor, work in the field. This is a reality. I'm just sharing it with you. You get all mad. I ain't making this stuff up. We shoveled human poop. Then food grew out of it. We picked the food and then we ate it. That's the cycle of life inside prison. That's just the way it is. Anyway, that's the story of how we shoveled human poop in WCI, state of Louisiana, field labor, prison system. It's a whole different monster down here. Y'all it ain't like over there on the West Coast. Y'all got all them rights. In the South, they don't give one crap less about your rights. You're going to catch that feel. And they don't care what if you're a shot caller, what gang you belong to. You catch that feel. And you think the gangs are trouble? Man, these guards down south, these good old boys, they'll put a hurt on you. So go ahead and cry all you want. Or you can like and subscribe to the Pen and the Shank, where we do crime and prison related content, unusual and unique. Not like the other channels. It's a bit different. But if you're patient, I think you'll really like it. Man, give me a like and subscribe to the Pen and the Shank. Let's get it.